And on everyone. So Saw X's official trailer is out, and I'm sure most, if not all of you, have seen it by now. And there's some really nice Easter eggs, little nice details that really got us all pumped for the upcoming film. Right? This is something that has been rumored and talked about for years now, and it was at points where it was like, is it actually going to come out? Is this even a real thing? Is this just something? And then finally, we got the announcement like about a year ago now, give or take, and we got the official trailer. And this is very likely going to be, by the way it looks, one of the better in the franchise. And I have to say that Saw, for one of the franchises that has like, 10 movies, it's actually been pretty consistent, right? Like most horror franchises, when they start getting deep into films, it's like, all right, like you're starting to go into space and you're starting to do all this craziness, and all of a sudden John Kramer becomes a zombie or something crazy like that, and it becomes something that it's not. But when you're talking about Saw, it's been pretty much what its original intention was. And yeah, there's been good movies, there've been bad movies, there've been, things that have not really hit the way that others have. But you have like Saw 6 is pretty much unanimously by many a like, hey, that was actually one of the better films in the franchise. And I do think that this has the potential to kind of fall in line with that. But here's my concern, because I do think it's a real concern. So when they started the Saw franchise, right, they had this idea. It was shopped around and shot down on several occasions, and then it finally found its way to the US with the US market, right? And with it, it immediately became a hit. People loved it. It was different. It was crazy. The twist at the end. I don't care who you are. Nobody knew that that was Jigsaw. That was John Kramer laying on the floor. That was one of the biggest shocks, I think, that there was in a very long time, right? And you kind of went down this continued story, and I get that the original idea was just one film. I get that they gave and diagnosed John Kramer with a terminal cancer, and it just became this thing where they clearly were trying to move away from that and continue it, right? Like Saw became more about the idea and more about what the sort of mission was, as far as like the characters in the film, right? And them all kind of following almost like a cult like thing, where you even had past victims and stuff like that that kind of joined Kramer's side, right? And they all now are buying into the master plan. And they tried to kind of go in that direction, and it doesn't seem, and just my guess from the film standpoint, or filmmaker standpoint, doesn't seem like it really hit the way that they had hoped, because we're starting to see now them kind of trying to tie back in, and they've done this before. What was it? I think it was like Saw 4. Some of that kind of took place in between 1 and 2 as well. This film looks like it's going to take place between 1 and 2, and like that's fine. But the problem is, if it is a huge success, how many times can you continue to bring back John, right? Like, how many times are we going to go down this like loophole? Are they going to eventually get to the point where they bring him back? Now, I do think that they could do that, and most people would probably just look past it. I do. Like, as long as it's semi-believable. And I'm not talking about bringing him back, like I mentioned earlier, as like a zombie or anything like that, right? But there's clearly a huge difference between the films that have him and the films that don't, right? And the consensus usually seems to be that, like, hey, we need to continue with this, or you need to find ways to be creative and incorporate him, whether it's through flashbacks or whether it's through whatever, right? In between films, like various film stuff like that. But you also don't want to get yourself handcuffed, like we've seen with horror fans. Like, think of like Halloween, where it's Michael Myers. So you either have to reboot the franchise, or you have to come up with some way to make him supernatural or something like that. Jason, right? Jason didn't start out as some super. All of a sudden, he's basically an undying zombie, right? Like, and you have a character that is so beloved that they've kind of built the back of the franchise on, but they tried to go away from it, and now they're coming full circle, and it's just I feel for like these offset films, like the in between films, you're almost better off doing it like Spiral, where it's like from the Book of Saw or something like that, and it's like a John Kramer story of like something that happened behind the scenes or some type of setup or whatever, right? Rather than like tying into because now the timeline just what I mean, you're kind of jumping back and forth, and now you got to like put it together. And we've seen that kind of dilute films at times. And maybe it doesn't. I don't know this for sure, but we've seen this happen with countless films. I mean, even like Paranormal Activity tried to do stuff like this, right? Because the other films weren't hitting the way that they had hoped, and all of a sudden they try to have these full circle things, and people are like, "What? Like, what are you talking about?" Right? Like, this just makes no sense. And that was like a supernatural, paranormal type franchise. And they essentially had to hard reboot it, which I actually did like the last Paranormal Activity. I actually thought that they what was it, Next to Kin or whatever. I thought that one was one of the better ones. But they had to essentially like hard reboot the whole thing and kind of tell a whole new story, right? And it's like I fear that they're gonna run the risk of painting themselves into a corner to where it's like, all right, all of our most successful Saw films have had John in them. And Saw 10, if we want to continue to do this, we're going to have to keep finding ways to bring him in. And it's going to get to the point where it's like, all right, like, are we going to ever continue where we left off? Or are we just going to keep just going back? And and he's got now 30 different things. Like, and some of these Saw films, as crazy as I think it's 3 and 4 all happen in like the same night or whatever, right? And it's just like, whoa, right? Like they've tried to have these tie-ins and stuff, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. And it is a movie, right? You got movie logic and all kinds of stuff. But still, like, they've done a pretty good job of like having this continuity to it and having these like tie-ins and like these things going on behind the scenes. John's doing this and Amanda's doing this, and like it's just I don't want to see them start trying to backtrack almost. I just feel like, I get you. They didn't have the intentions of doing 10, 11 films now, if you count like Spiral and stuff, right? Like, I don't think they had the original idea, especially back then, right? When the first Saw came out. Now, almost every movie is made with the intention of having a sequel or a trilogy, especially in the horror space, right? Like, that's the trend right now. If this is successful, we're going to have another one. So be ready, be prepared. Kind of write your film as a way that, like, you can continue from where you left off type thing, right? Like, so we're seeing that a lot. But back then, that wasn't the intention. It was like, hey, here's a film that got shot down a bunch of times. Maybe it'll have success. Oh, it does have success. Oh, you guys want more? Okay, well, let's make another one and then another one. But they still could have kept him around, right? It wasn't like they could have figured it out, right? Either A, they cured him, right? I get he had terminal cancer, but like people have survived that. People have came back from that. Or B, like they could have just we've seen films just kind of brush that to the side. Or you just keep making the films, and most people probably wouldn't even have noticed. And you could have just kind of tied it in as like, okay, he's got, 6 months to live, and you have 10 films and all of this is happening in that 6 month period or whatever. Could add 20 films and all. Like I said, like 2 or 3 of the films all happened in like one night. So it's not that far-fetched to think that they could have done that. But the other thing is too, is just like, bring him back in the sense of like, explain it. I mean, if the guy's able to make these like extravagant plots and plans and just machinery that can just do, like, if he's smart enough to figure all this stuff out, you're telling me he's not smart enough to have faked his death or planned that? And I get like the way he died, get his, slash, I gotta be careful because YouTube, but we all know how he died, right? We've all seen the film. Okay, and you see him on the corner table and all that stuff, yada yada. But that doesn't mean like the coroner, like you couldn't tie it into where the coroner was involved and he's like a disciple too. And so it was all a ruse, right? And so you just had all these people that were in on it. Like you could explain it if you really wanted to. And even if it's not like bulletproof, most fans would be like, all right, like, because they want John Kramer to continue, right? They want his character in this film. And so I'm curious to see where they go from here, right? If this film is successful, which I believe it will be, I think it will be, and if this film is one of the better ones, which, again, I believe it will be, do they continue to kind of backtrack, or do they say, okay, well, we got that one out of the way, now let's go jump over here and kind of continue that story? Curious to see. I really am. I'm curious to see how, like, what's next after this film? What's next after X? Say that 10 times fast. But, look, I'm going to watch the movie. I'm hoping for a good movie. I think it will be, right? I think this film it seems to kind of have everything that you want in it, right? And look, some of the story hasn't been great. Some of the story hasn't really added up and made sense and whatnot. So it's not like you can't figure it out with John, right? And have him continue if you needed to, right? Like, and in a lot of ways, we're in it for the traps. We're in it for just like the twist and the complexities of it all, right? Not saying that we want just some like garbage story or anything like that, but there is a big part of it that is like, oh, I can't wait to see what kind of traps and stuff that they came up with. I can't wait to see what the big twist is and who was involved and whatnot, right? Like, that's what it's about ultimately, at least at this point. So could they make it work? Sure. Will they? I don't know. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, so I pass the question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? Do you agree with me? Do you think, like, yeah, that's kind of a big concern? Do you think it's not? Would you be okay with them just kind of, like, brushing him dying under the rug or something, or maybe just kind of like skipping over that, hard rebooting or something, like that part, or have like, what is it, the requel, where it's like a direct sequel after Scream 1 or X 1 and 2, Saw X 1 and 2, like, again, however you feel, whatever your thoughts are, love to hear it. Let me know down in the comments below.